This video is sponsored by Crimson Manifesto and Knuckles OX. Welcome back to the channel, Plus Ultraman. It's witty greeting to the audience, and we're getting back to our story of Piccolo training Goten and Trunks early, which you can catch part 1 of here, as it's very important context, because, first and foremost, we have to talk about what's cut from part 1, or part 0, on account of how much of it was theory crafted, versus an actual narrative so far, at least partially or not in my usual style of doing so. So firstly, as it was a bit understated in part 1, the focus on the development of young Goten and Trunks, in order to continue stimulating his own training, causes a greater focus and importance from Piccolo in the development of young Dende as well. So we are keeping the 3, or I suppose 4 or 5-man Dragon Ball hunt set during the time skip, along with the wish to give Dende the same level of potential unlocking ability as a Granddaughter Namekian Guardian immediately, without having to wait until he is as old as someone like Guru to access it. It should also be stated that Mr. Popo is of note, because he would like to keep up with and be ahead of the Guardian of Earth in terms of power, so he can better serve him. So despite his pacifism, Popo would have the power to back up that filler feat of holding Goten and Trunks in this timeline, especially since true Eldritch horrors could be unleashed if his potential were to be unlocked. Dende would then use his new power to unlock the potential of Piccolo, Trunks, and Goten, in the same way which was done for Krillin and Gohan by Granddaughter Guru, which enabled very rapid growth for them during the Namek Saga and beyond. Or, if preferred, you could reasonably interpret this as a way better version of that potential unlocking method, since it's being done by a younger and stronger Namekian than Guru. As a result, Dende may be in a better state to complete the act of bringing out more untapped power. I will say definitively, for the sake of the narrative and its stakes, this doesn't result in any ultimate or mystic form shenanigans, at least not yet, but it does give a major power boost to our MCs of the scenario, independent of what they would get from their actual hard work and training. One which I think a lot of people agreed from part 1 could have fit fairly well even in canon, so these guys weren't so often left behind despite having interesting stuff going on in the Canon Buu saga. Also, keep in mind, to this point of us not getting an ultimate Piccolo, Goten, or Trunks from this, even though it's said Shenron gave Piccolo the same kind of potential unlocking ritual. Piccolo himself also says that little bit extra the dragon gave him went a long way, and Dende, even if he is better than Guru, can't exactly give anything which would go quite that far by himself. No matter what, it's still a worthwhile boost, which would serve Piccolo's ends greatly, especially if we really do take the benefit of the joke of having a power awakened Mr. Popo as a training partner and assistant master. And most importantly, while it's simultaneously great for their training, this is also fun and exciting on the boys' end. So we'll also say, for the youthful hybrid Saiyan budding warriors, after their Dende boost, if they were struggling to figure out the ascension of Super Saiyan 2 from the initial point of achieving and then mastering Super Saiyan, then they definitely can get there afterwards, if not with just a bit more hard and intensive work, since anger, after all, may not be their only method to getting to that power beyond Super Saiyan, like a lot of the prior generations of Saiyans seem to use, or at least seem to use out of perceived necessity, thanks to Piccolo's training them earlier and better than in canon, and far more thoroughly than he had a chance to teach Gohan. Goten and Trunks in this timeline won't have nearly as much of their talent squandered or overlooked. In fact, with the progress they've made so far, they can sort of feel out the transformation in terms of the flow of their ki, a lot more in-depth and detailed, almost like certain points in their body act as pools or gates for their energy, with the recognition and appreciation of them, and the tingly sensation in the back they induce when focused on, eliciting an easier ascension to the second form of Super Saiyan for them. I think this could be super possible, since Goten and Trunks are exponentially more like Universe 6 Saiyans in how we've seen them develop power-wise, and with the whole S-Cell concept in mind. So this is another point Piccolo could be particularly helpful as a teacher for the boys in, using his wisdom, love of meditation, and discipline and precise ki control, which he would certainly be instilling in them as much as he could. So I could easily see him helping the boys specifically figure out the tingly back thing. I'll say again though, for the sake of stakes in the narrative, they don't just immediately get Super Saiyan 2, as I do appreciate the argument from some that Super Saiyan 2, even recognizing Goten and Trunks' potential, should still take some real effort and adversity to get, just on account of the fact that the overall power scale and what they are aware of or interested in reaching the point of the series we're setting the story in right now. So I think that's a fair assessment, but overall, they definitely do have the potential to reach that level, or even higher really, prior to the Buu saga, both in canon and especially in this timeline. Another thing we're for sure keeping is the fact that this earlier and more effective training would be a major leg up for Piccolo and the boys, even when we strip it of some of the more hack stuff like potential unlocks or immediate transformations, again, just due to the insane potential of Goten and Trunks, and the fact that it would actually be utilized in the story from the get-go, and at pretty much all times from then on. It's also therefore extremely conservative to say that the boys are about as strong as Gohan at the Cell games when our story really picks up, and therefore their power together as a team is something even more incredible, essentially what it would have been like if Gohan and Cell had teamed up and fought. That comparison is actually apt though, since there would likely be just the slightest difference in power between the two boys, on account of them still having inherited Vegeta and Goku's rivalry to some extent, along with Trunks still being a year older, while Piccolo's fruits of training with the young prodigies, alongside his potential unlock, helps further achieve greater synchronicity with Nail and Kami within him. And like we've discussed earlier in the story, Simply meditating and deeper exploring the nature of this bond is incredibly beneficial to Piccolo, and one day soon, it will be to his new students as well. He as the master's gains are so great, to the point that as a necessity for this training, Piccolo as he is now would easily be a match for Super Perfect Cell, Super Saiyan 2 Gohan, or both the monsters of the Cell games at once. Especially after essentially fighting the two so much recently, in his image training, the Pendulum Room, and by proxy, through sparring partners comparable to them, as they would be the most logical and enticing benchmark for him to reach, and solely because of the gold mine of progress and dormant power that is Goten and Trunks. The master of the Demon School actually has a viable method of reaching and exceeding that benchmark. Thus, Piccolo has reached a tier a lot more comparable to some movie bosses from this period of time, easily establishing him as the strongest being on Earth currently, despite him being very low-key about it. But yes, obviously, Goten, Trunks, Piccolo, and even Dende compared to canon get extremely strong, but we will also be keeping the idea that they keep this on the down low. I know there may be some confusion on how that possibly could happen, but again, I feel like one of the few things Piccolo would exemplify and stress overall with his training is proper ki control, focus, and subtlety. So that along with some minor discipline from him, and the excitement to hold back until a good opportunity comes to showcase power is given, would drive them all to hold back on any major showings of strength to the other Z fighters for at least 2 years. While all of this that we've discussed so far has been happening in the background, putting us finally in the plot of the new stuff. 6 years into the time skip, and just before the Great Saiyaman arc will begin, this timeline has another convenient, yet stark difference, and not only recognizing a Z movie's events, but doing so later in the series than it was originally meant to take place. Here, we'll be shifting the timeline along a bit wonkily to have the events of BoJack Unbound take place now. This, funnily enough, means changing the birthday of a random rich guy's son, as well as delaying the escape from King Kai's planet. So that way, there isn't so long a wait for a tournament to showcase power in. And better yet, it's one which won't exclude Trunks and Goten from competing with all ages, as they'd surely be aiming for contests of strength with Vegeta and Gohan as well, whom Piccolo would also want to face to see how they've improved. Thus, the trio all join in on the intergalactic tournament being held by Mr. Satan, which based on how we play it, could also result in an earlier meeting for some other characters that would also change the timeline some more, with the events of this BoJack Unbound taking place in this context, having our souped up Piccolo, Goten, Trunks, and maybe even Dende and Mr. Popo in the mix, just for the laughs and story opportunity of it. That honestly works really well, since Kid Trunks can fill in for the future Trunks that shouldn't be there. That is, unless he came back specifically for the tournament. You could also really power Gohan and Vegeta up in this context, since even if they don't know exactly everything that's been going on with Piccolo and the boys, they know enough that has made them train more than either would have over the last 6 years in canon. Gohan would also have had, or be just near his growth spurt in this context. Like literally, it's probably the very next day after he goes to sleep type beat. This is also good, because like in canon, the Earthling Z fighters will still enter, and in fact will probably feel even more demotivated to participate, because of the changes in just Gohan and Vegeta. Though that said, even if he has begun training again, Vegeta likely isn't entering. I think the best you could hope for is getting him to come and watch and see how Trunks is going to do, since he probably would be really curious to see how Piccolo has been training him. Not really curious to put the effort or time into investigating, but you know. So for the Earthlings, it's pretty hopeless when they're not even seeing how strong Piccolo or even Dende has gotten. But keep that in mind, since if we really do that joke, which I say is fully worth it on just the grounds of it being interesting for Dende to offer the Earthlings potential unleashes of their own, as consolation prizes if you'll call it that. And it's especially worth it since that's an easy way to make a DBZ era reference. Just having Krillin be really impressed with Dende being able to do it for him again, even if he thought there wasn't that much more potential to bring out. Going forward, our Krillin, Yamcha, and Tien are going to be a great bit stronger than they are in canon, which could also have fun implications, and is another happy coincidence of Piccolo and the boys' schemes. When the prelims are over, I believe it'd still come down to a similar roster, just with Goten and Kid Trunks knocking out future Trunks and one of the jobbers from the ranks. It also makes sense for Dende and Popo to make it there, but on account of the pacifism, I could see Popo only fighting so long as Dende is in the competition, and thus forfeiting if any of their friends are unlucky enough to face him. Honestly, the dream way for this to happen would be in the prelims, as a tag match between Dende, Popo, Goten, and Trunks, with that being how the former duo are eliminated, Dende going down, and Popo forfeiting the seat to him. Not long after, BoJack and his gang roll up, and things start to look a lot like in canon, with the sole exception of Gohan teaming up with Goten and Trunks here, and doing a great deal better against the other Heritans with their help, while Vegeta joining them still makes an eventual and significantly more impressive appearance, with he and Gohan both being equally shocked with how much power Piccolo has brought out of the boys. When BoJack finally joins the fray himself and unleashes his full power, Piccolo is ultimately the one who saves the day when he protects the Saiyans, taking his weights off and engaging BoJack on seemingly equal footing, before deciding to respect him by revealing something brand new he learned from teaching the boys. He didn't unlock a new form or technique per se, but remember, he has figured out a way to put himself into a higher gear or level as Trunks would put it, by seeking his mind, spirit, and goals with Nail and Kami, literally one of Piccolo's technically a transformation/boost abilities in the Budokai games. This power allows Piccolo to overcome full power Bojack, even easier than Gohan would in the original movie non-canon, since Piccolo would have a multitude of options to complete this task, simply using his various techniques, which have now been further mastered, souped up, and evolved beyond belief, like the explosive demon wave, special beam cannon, Hellzone grenade, or perhaps even some of the new things he's cooked up with Goten and Trunks. The Mafuba would also be a pretty great option, which could open a lot of other options in the process, this offering a possibly easy enough route to victory that Bojack could be spared, or maybe even turn good alongside his crew, as I could easily see Piccolo seeing some of himself as a demon clansman, as well as Namek in the Heretians, and just as Goku would view it, he could also get another great potential training partner out of the Space Pirate. Plus, if Gohan and the boys take out his gang more successfully, more of them could survive as well, and less innocent lives could be taken in the process. Thus, funnily enough, this could be a timeline where Krillin has a legitimate dilemma over whether he wants to pursue a relationship with Android 18 who he met first, or the likes of Zangia, after being given a similar second chance to her. I just gotta mention it somewhere since I've never felt it was that worth a scenario of its own, despite being a funny dynamic, but it usually feels more like the byproduct of other what-ifs in themselves. This one by necessity kinda having to come from a what if the movies were canon themselves, and with the end goal of just setting Krillin up with someone different. That said though, regardless of his choice, he primarily among the humans would be set up to get a lot stronger over the next year, and desire to catch up to Piccolo and the Saiyans, as well as being able to handle his new girlfriend, whomever she may be. We may have to discuss what we keep in discard in terms of the theory crafting next part as well, but for sure, Bojack Unbound ends in an overwhelming victory, along with some prequel stuff for the setup of the Buu saga. The stinger at the end being Goku recognizing just how tough Piccolo and the boys have really gotten from Otherworld, as he hadn't really decided to go down to Earth himself, which would have broken the rules in the process. This, however, makes him really happy, as well as proud of his second son Goten, and even a bit anxious to return to life, far before any of the excitement he is unaware is already incoming. But that's where we'll be leaving this story off for right now.